धरवारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिधरवारी यशोदानंदन ब्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरवनचारी यमुना तीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरवनचारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा 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 हरे हरे जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रामा जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रामा जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय षड्गोस्वामी जय षड्गोस्वामी जय गुरु परंपरा जय गुरु परंपरा जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय गुरुदेव जय गुरुदेव निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल हरे कृष्णा ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधारा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण Hare Krishna to all the devotees who have come today for the Sunday Bhagavatam reading. Today morning I was actually just reflecting a bit. I just returned back from India yesterday, so still in a bit of a time zone difference, but and tired. But I was just thinking that how important sadhana is to our life, and not only sadhana but also regular sadhana. it's very easy for us to fall apart, move away from the track we are on. And that's where it's so important that we do our sadhana properly, but do our sadhana regularly also. That to me, that was my biggest reflection from today morning. And I'm saying this because today morning I woke up with a little bit of lethargy. And I must thank Shilpa Mataji. Actually, she sent me this message uh, yesterday reminding me of the class. So I get a bit confused because I don't frequently look at the RTI app because out here nobody uses RTI. So it just stays, and the notifications so don't seem to be coming on my phone for some reason. and uh, and when she sent me the message, I was very grateful because I thought that this is a very, very important thing, because I was seeing lethargy in my sadhana. And that came out of the fact that over the last 2 weeks, of course, we were doing a lot of spiritual things. We took a break. So especially it was a kind of a vacation. We went back to India. We took a break to see family, but also use that opportunity to go to dhams like Mayapur, and also in when we came to Hyderabad, we went to Ahobalim also. But then what I realized was that while we were doing this, my Shravana was taking a hit seriously for the last maybe 2 weeks, or maybe even a bit beyond that, because December usually is a very hectic month for me. My Shravana was taking a bit of a hit, and I saw that, realized this today morning, there was a sense of lethargy. I don't know whether it was tiredness or what, but I still feel that it is extremely important for us to regularly hear Harikatha and regularly reflect on it. Otherwise, it's very easy for us to fall away from the track. So just I wanted to share that. We'll now begin with our reading of today's Bhagavatam from Canto 9. Just let me share my screen. I don't know why is this not working. I hope you are able to see my screen. So we'll read from chapter 7, and it's a short chapter. It's more in story format. So there are no purports, in fact, in this entire chapter. And it's around, the title of the chapter is The Descendants of King Mandhata. And I'll read through this first, the introduction for the chapter. In this chapter, the descendants of King Mandhata are described, and in this connection, the histories of Purukutsa and Harishchandra are also given. The most prominent son of Mandhata was Ambarisha. His son was Yavanashva, and Yavanashva's son was Haritha. These three personalities were the best in the dynasty of Mandhata. Purukutsa, another son of Mandhata, married the sister of the snakes, Sarpagana, named Narmada. The son of Purukutsa was Trasadasyu, whose son was Anaranya. Anaranya's son was Haryashva. Haryashva's son was Praruna. Praruna's son was Tribandhana. And Tribandhana's son was Satyavrata, also known as Trishanku. When Trishanku kidnapped the daughter of a Brahmana, his father cursed him for this sinful act. And Trishanku became a Chandala, worse than a Shudra. Later, by the influence of Vishwamitra, he was brought to the heavenly planets. But by the influence of the demigods, he fell back downwards. He was stopped in his fall, however, by the influence of Vishwamitra. The son of Trishanku was Harishchandra. Harishchandra once performed a Rajasuya Yajna, but Vishwamitra cunningly took all of Harishchandra's possessions as a Dakshina contribution and chastised Harishchandra in various ways. Because of this, a quarrel arose between Vishwamitra and Vashishta. Harishchandra had no sons, but on the advice of Narada, he worshipped Varuna, and in this way he got a son named Rohita. Harishchandra promised that Rohita would be used to perform a Varuna Yagna. Varuna reminded Harishchandra repeatedly about this Yagna, but the king, because of affection for his son, gave various arguments to avoid sacrificing him. Thus time passed and gradually the son grew up. To safeguard his life, the boy then took bow and arrows in his hand and went to the forest. Meanwhile, at home, Harishchandra suffered from dropsy because of an attack from Varuna. When Rohita received the news that his father was suffering, he wanted to return to the capital, but King Indra prevented him from doing so. Following the instructions of Indra, Rohita lived in the forest for 6 years and then returned home. Rohita purchased Shunaha Shepaha, the second son of Ajigargartha, and gave him to his father Harishchandra as a sacrificial animal. In this way, the sacrifice was performed, Varuna and other demigods were pacified, and Harishchandra was freed from disease. In this sacrifice, Vishwamitra was the Hota priest, Jamadagni was the Advaryu, Vashishta was the Brahma, and Ayasya was the Udgata. King Indra, being very satisfied by the sacrifice, gave Harishchandra a golden chariot, and Vishwamitra gave him transcendental knowledge. Thus, Shukadeva Goswami describes how Harishchandra achieved this perfection. Okay, so let's read verse by verse. I'll read the first text and the translation, and then I will open it up, and if from the next verse onwards, if any of the other devotees also want to read, please feel free to unmute yourself and you can read the verse and the translation. Since there are only 26 verses and there are no purports, we'll be able to finish this quite much on time. I'm pretty much sure about that. Text 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Mandhatu Putra Pravaro Yo Ambarisha Prakirtitaha Pitamahena Pravritto Yauvanashvastu Tatsutaha Haritastasya Putro Bhun Mandhatri Pravara Ime. Shukadeva Goswami said, the most prominent amongst the sons of Mandhata was he who is celebrated as Ambarisha. Ambarisha was accepted as son by his grandfather Yauvanashva. Ambarisha's son was Yauvanashva, and Yauvanashva's son was Harita. In Mandhata's dynasty, Ambarisha, Harita, and Yauvanashva were very prominent. So we are learning a little bit about the lineage here. And from Mandhata, amongst his prominent sons, of course the most prominent was Ambarisha. And it's mentioned that Ambarisha was accepted as son by his grandfather Yauvanashva. And Ambarisha's son was Yauvanashva. And his Yauvanashva's son was Harita. And that amongst the sons in the Mandhata dynasty, The three people who were very prominent were Ambarisha, Haritha, and Yavanashva. So we know a little bit about these personalities, of course. Haritha he was a king, and who later on he became a Brahmana. So there was a particular episode where he goes out into the forest. He goes out basically as a king, to see what is happening around, and he notices that there is a lion or a tiger that's about to kill a cow. And he takes out his bow and arrow and shoots on the lion, if I'm right. And then, but in that time, actually the lion also kills the cow. So Haritha repents for it, and then he does penance to Lord Narayana. And Lord Narayana then comes and blesses him and says that you are a Kshatriya, but you also have the qualities of a Brahmana, and from now onwards you will become a lineage. So that's why we have a Gotra also by the name Haritha. Of course, we know about the other two personalities pretty well. We'll now continue reading from text 2. Text 2. Narmada bhratribhirdatta Urukutsaya yogragai Taya rasatalam inito Bhujagendra prayuktaya. Translation. The serpent brothers of Narmada gave Narmada to Purukutsa. Being sent by Vasuki, she took Purukutsa to the lower regions of the universe. Purport. Before describing the descendants of Purukutsa, the son of Mandhata, Shukadeva Goswami first describes how Purukutsa was married to Narmada, who was induced to take him to the lower region of the universe. Text 3. Gandharvan avadhi tatra Vadhyan vai Vishnu Shakti Drik Nagalabdhavarah Sarpad Abhayam Smaratam Idam. Translation. There in Rasatala, the lower region of the universe, Purukutsa, being empowered by Lord Vishnu, was able to kill all the Gandharvas who deserved to be killed. Purukutsa received the benediction from the serpents that anyone who remembers this history of his being brought by Narmada to the lower region of the universe will be assured of safety from the attack of snakes. Text 4. And does anybody want to read the verse? Yeah,
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Please read, Mother.
Text 4. Tra saddasyu paurukutso yo naranyasya dehakrit haryasvastatssutastasmat prarunota tribhandanaha. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, the son of Purukutsa. Prabhuji, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible now, Mataji. Please read.
Okay. I'm getting echoes.
Okay. Let me mute.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, please continue.
Yes, Prabhuji. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The son of Purukutsa was Trasadasyu, who was the father of Anaranya. Anaranya's son was Haryasva, the father of Praruna. Praruna was the father of Tribandana. Can I read the next one also, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji, please continue.
Text 5-6. Tasya satyavrata putras trishankur iti vishrutaha praptas chandalatam shapad गुरो कौशिकतेजसा सशरीरो गतस्वर्गम् अद्यापि दिविदृश्यते पातितो वाक्षिरा देवैस्तेनैव स्तम्भितो बलात्. Translation: The son of Tribandana was Satyavrata, who is celebrated by the name Trishanku. Because he kidnapped the daughter of a Brahmana when she was being married, his father cursed him to become a Chandala, lower than a Shudra. Thereafter, by the influence of Vishwamitra, he went to the higher planetary system, the heavenly planets, in his material body, but because of the prowess of the demigods, he fell back downward. Nonetheless, by the power of Vishwamitra, he did not fall all the way down. Even today, he can still be seen hanging in the sky, head downward. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Let's continue reading. Text 7. Traishankavo Harishchandro Vishwamitra Vashishtayo Yannimittam Abhut Yuddham Pakshinor Bahu Varshikam. Translation: The son of Trishanku was Harishchandra. Because of Harishchandra, there was a quarrel between Vishwamitra and Vashishta, who for many years fought one another, having been transformed into birds. Purport: Vishwamitra and Vashishta were always inimical. Formerly, Vishwamitra was a Kshatriya, and by undergoing severe austerities, he wanted to become a Brahmana. But Vashishta would not agree to accept him. In this way, there was always disagreement between the two. Later, however, Vashishta accepted him because of Vishwamitra's quality of forgiveness. Once Harishchandra performed a yajna for which Vishwamitra was the priest. But Vishwamitra, being angry at Harishchandra, took away all his possessions, claiming them as a contribution of Dakshina. Vashishta, however, did not like this, and therefore a fight arose between Vashishta and Vishwamitra. The fighting became so severe that each of them cursed the other. One of them said, "May you become a bird," and the other said, "May you become a duck." Thus both of them became birds and continued fighting for many years because of Harishchandra. We can see that such a great mystic yogi as Saubhari became a victim of sense gratification, and such great sages as Vasishta and Vishwamitra became birds. This is the material world. Abrahma Bhuvanal Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. Within this material world or within this universe, however elevated one may be in material qualities, one must suffer the conditions of birth, death, old age and disease, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Therefore, Krishna says that this material world is simply miserable, Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam. The Bhagavatam says, Padam Padam Yad Vipadam. At every step here there is danger. Therefore, because the Krishna consciousness movement provides the opportunity for the human being to get out of this material world, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, this movement is the greatest benediction in human society. And I was mentioning this at the beginning of the class also by sharing my reflection that even for a moment, if we are turning our head away from Krishna, our face away, our focus, we are moving our focus away from Krishna, Maya is there to capture us, which aptly is reflected in what Prabhupada mentions here in his purport, where he says, Padam Padam Yad Vipadam. At every step here there is danger. So we all need to be very, very careful, because we won't even know of it. And by the time we realize, it may be too late. we may be already be sucked into that quicksand of this material world and we will not be able to come out. And we can't even compare ourselves to great rishis and munis like Vishwamitra and Vashishta. But they were also not spared. So as long as here we are in this material world and we are trying to build more and more material qualities, we are bound to become a victim of sense gratification. And these great personalities were not spared either, and which tells us that we need to be more and more careful. And as Prabhupada says that in this Kali Yuga, the only solution, but the simplest solution, is Harinam. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, we will be able to get out of this whirlpool of this quicksand and cross this material ocean of nescience. It's the only solution that is there. So please keep that in mind. Let's keep chanting, but also most importantly, keep your sadhana tight and let's be disciplined in that endeavor. Let's continue reading. Text 8. So anaptyo vishannatma naradasyo padeshatah varunam sharanam yatah putro me jayatam prabho. Translation: Harishchandra had no son and was therefore extremely morose. Once, therefore, following the advice of Narada, he took the shelter of Varuna and said to him, "My lord, I have no son. Would you kindly give me one?" Text 9. Yadi viro maharaja tenaiva tvam yaje iti tatheti varunenasya putro jatastu rohitah. Translation: O King Parikshit, Harishchandra begged Varuna, "My lord, if a son is born to me, with that son I shall perform a sacrifice for your satisfaction." When Harishchandra said this, Varuna replied, "Let it be so." Because of Varuna's benediction, Harishchandra begot a son named Rohita. Text 10. Jata suto hya anenanga mam yajasveti so abravit yada pashur nirdashah syad atha medhyo bhavediti. Translation: Thereafter, when the child was born, Varuna approached Harishchandra and said, "Now you have a son. With this son, you can offer me a sacrifice." In answer to this, Harishchandra said, "After 10 days have passed since an animal's birth, the animal becomes fit to be sacrificed." So here Harishchandra has already developed a deep sense of attachment to his son, and he's now trying to evade or the promise that he has made, the commitment that he has made, and he's now saying that 10 days has passed, then the animal becomes fit to be sacrificed. Now let's see what happens next. Text 11. Nirdashe chassa agatya yajasvetya ah so abravit danta pashor yaj jayeram athavedhyo bhavediti. After 10 days, Varuna came again and said to Harishchandra, "Now you can perform the sacrifice." Harishchandra replied, "When an animal grows teeth, then it becomes pure enough to be sacrificed." So he's again trying to further and further push this out. But what we need to keep in mind, Prabhujis and Matajis, is that when we try to push out an action, we get more and more attached to inaction. And you would have also seen this. The farther we more and more we try to procrastinate on actions or activities or commitments, you will see that more and more we get stuck into a state of inaction and not wanting to do that. And it is like inertia, so it's like you're gaining more and more mass, and that inertia becomes so heavy, eventually you're not able to even nudge or even push it out. And this is true also of our sadhana, of our spiritual practice, of our spiritual progress. If we try to push out things, like let's say we are chanting in the morning, we're supposed to get up and chant in Brahma Muhurta. Then one day we are tired and we say that, Are aaj nahi, today I'm a bit tired, let me get up a little late. And you will see that the next day there will be an inclination, at least, to again do that, because you have enjoyed some kind of sense gratification during that period, which is maybe rest or whatever. And you want to taste that again. And you end up pushing out again. And then you'll end up pushing out again and pushing out again and pushing out again. And then slowly it'll come to a time wherein we are finishing our rounds closer to midnight instead of doing it in Brahma Muhurta. So this is what is happening with Harishchandra also. He is continuously now pushing out. He's getting a more deeper sense of attachment to his son, and therefore he's forgetting the commitment that he made to Varuna. Text 12. Danta jata yajasveti sa pratyahatha sau abravit yada patantyasya danta athamedhyo bhavediti. When the teeth grew, Varuna came and said to Harishchandra, Now the animal has grown teeth and you can perform the sacrifice. Harishchandra replied, When all the teeth have fallen out, then it will be fit for sacrifice. Text 13. Pashor nipatita danta yajasvetya ahaso abravit yada pasho punardanta jayante tha pashu shuchihi. When the teeth had fallen out, Varuna returned and said to Harishchandra, Now the animal's teeth have fallen out and you can perform the sacrifice. But Harishchandra has replied, When the animal's teeth grow in again, then he will be pure enough to be sacrificed. So first the milk teeth came, they fell out, and now he's buying more time in saying, Let the permanent set of teeth come. Text 14. Punarjata yajasveti so pratyahatha so abravit sanahiko yada rajanyotha pashu shuchihi. When the teeth grew in again, Varuna came and said to Harishchandra, Now you can perform the sacrifice. But Harishchandra then said, O king, when the sacrificial animal becomes a Kshatriya and is able to shield himself to fight with the enemy, then he will be purified. The procrastination continues.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, can I read?
Yes, Mataji, please. Hare Krishna.
Translation Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Iti putranuradena snehayantrita chetasa kalam varichayata tam ukto devatam aikshata. Harishchandra was certainly very much attached to his son because of his affection. He asked the demigod Varuna to wait. Thus Varuna waited and waited for the time to come. Should I read next one also?
Yes, Mataji, please continue.
रोहितास्तद् अभिज्ञाय पितुः कर्म चिकीर्स्तियं प्राणप्रेक्षुर्धनुष्पाणिर् pratyāpadayata. Rohita could understand that his father intended to offer him as an animal for sacrifice. Therefore, just to save himself from death, he equipped himself with bow and arrows and went to the forest.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. So now the young boy Rohita is beginning to understand that there is a situation, that eventually his father will have to give in and he'll be offered for sacrifice, and to save himself he goes to the forest. So let's see what happens now. Text 17. Pitaram varunagrastam Shrutva jata mahodaram Rohito gramam Eyaya Tam Indraha Pratyashedata. Translation. When Rohita heard that his father had been attacked by dropsy due to Varuna and that his abdomen had grown very large, he wanted to return to the capital. But King Indra forbade him to do so. So, evidently, because Harishchandra was not able to keep his promise, Varuna was unhappy about it, and Harishchandra was now suffering with dropsy because of that. Text 18. Bhume paryatanam punyam तीर्थक्षेत्र निषेवनै रोहिता या दिशच्चक्रः सोऽप्यरण्ये अवसत् समाम्. King Indra advised Rohita to travel to different pilgrimage sites and holy places, for such activities are pious indeed. Following this instruction, Rohita went to the forest for 1 year.
Krishna,
Yes, Mataji.
Krishna Prabhuji, can I do?
Yeah, yes, Mataji.
एवं द्वितीये तृतीये चतुर्थे पञ्चमे तथा अभ्येत्याभ्येत्य स्थविरो विप्रो भूत्वा वृत्रः. In this way, at the end of the second, third, fourth, and fifth years, when Rohita went to return to his capital, the king of heaven, Indra, approached him as old Brahmana and forbade him to return, repeating the same words as in the previous year. Should I read the next one also?
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah. षष्ठं संवत्सरं तत्र चरित्वा रोहितः पुरीम् उपव्रजन् अजीगर्तात् आक्रीणन् मध्यमं सुतं शुनशेफं पशुं पित्रे प्रदाय समवन्दता. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thereafter, in the 6th year, after wandering in the forest, Rohita returned to the capital of his father. He purchased from Ajigartha his second son, named Shunashepha. Then he offered Shunashepha to his father, Harishchandra, to be used as the sacrificial animal, and offered Harishchandra his respectful obeisances. Purport. It appears that in those days a man could be purchased for any purpose. Harishchandra was in need of a person to sacrifice as the animal in a yajna and thus fulfill his promise to Varuna, and a man was purchased from another man for this purpose. Millions of years ago, animal sacrifice and slave trade both existed. Indeed, they have existed since time immemorial. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada does not elaborate more on this, but clearly, in other places he has emphasized that in different yugas this was allowed. That is the the sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and all. Clearly, this is not something for Kali Yuga. We'll continue reading now that Rohita has come. So another thing, that important thing, that point that comes out is when you are ready. So clearly over here, Indra played a clear role in terms of guiding Rohita, and for 4 or 5 years he was trying to return, but Indra was telling him no, and clearly Rohita was listening to that advice humbly, and he was going back and performing what he was asked to do by Indra. And when the time was ready, of course, then Indra allowed him to say that yes, you can go back now, and that was when Rohita comes back. So it's very important to keep here in mind that sometimes, for me at least, what I'm taking away from this is that the importance of having somebody to guide us in our journey. And often we might not be able to see when we are ready. We might claim to be ready for something, but we might not be ready for that. And this is where it's important to take shelter under a more advanced spiritual personality who can guide us accordingly. And that is what has happened over here. Text 21.
Shall
Yes, Mataji.
read the next.
Yes.
ततः पुरुषमेधेन हरिश्चन्द्रो महायशः मुक्तोदरो यजादेवान् Varunadin Mahatkatha. Thereafter, the famous king Harishchandra, one of the exalted persons in history, performed grand sacrifices by sacrificing a man and pleased all the demigods. In this way, dropsy created by Varuna was cured. Text 22. Vishwamitro bhavat tasmin hota chatvaryor atmavan Jamadagni अभ्युद ब्रह्मा वशिष्ठो वशिष्ठो यास्यः समागः. In that great human sacrifice, Vishwamitra was the chief priest to offer oblations. The perfectly self-realized Jamadagni had the responsibility for chanting the mantras from the Yajur Veda. Vashishta was the chief Brahmanical priest, and the sage Agastya was the reciter of the hymns of Samaveda. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, just to further emphasize that it was not that we could just do an animal sacrifice simply or a human sacrifice, it was as easy, because clearly there was a procedure to it, and such highly qualified chief priests or priests had to be present there, and not one person is able to do the entire yajna, right? So you had one person like Vishwamitra who was a chief priest to offer oblations. Jamadagni was responsible for chanting the mantras. Vashishta was the chief Brahmanical priest. Ayasya was reciting the hymns from the Samaveda. So you can imagine the kind of exalted audience that was there, who was involved in the sacrifice to make it a successful sacrifice. In today's modern world in Kali Yuga, there are so many sacrifices that are done, and we typically, when you are going to a lot of these Shakti temples, there we see a lot of sacrifices being made. But the question that we might want to ask ourselves is, here, is the right process or procedure being followed? And that is why Prabhupada has said that in Kali Yuga, the best austerity is Harinam. There's no need for any other sacrifice that needs to be done, because we are not capable of doing those sacrifices in Kali Yuga. We don't have the capability nor the knowledge to do that. Text 23. Tasmai tushto dadav indraha shatakaumbham mayam ratham shunaha shefasya mahatmyam uparishtat prachaksyate. Translation: King Indra, being very pleased with Harishchandra, offered him a gift of a golden chariot. Shunha Shepaha, Shepa's glories will be presented along with the description of the son of Vishwamitra. So here they are glorifying Shuna Shepa, was actually offered in the sacrifice. Text 24. Satyam saram dhritim drishtva sabharyasya cha bhupate Vishwamitro bhrisham prito dadav avihatam hatam gatim. The great sage Vishwamitra saw that Harishchandra, Maharaja Harishchandra, along with his wife, was truthful, forbearing, and concerned with essence. Thus he gave them imperishable knowledge for fulfillment of the human mission. So we'll come to the last two verses. Yeah. Text 25 and 26. Manah prithivyaam tam adbhis tejasapo anilena chat khevayum dharayam staccha bhutadau tam mahatmani tasmin dhyana-kalam dhyatva tayajnanam vinirdahan hitva tam svena bhavena nirvana sukha samvida anirdeshya pratarkyena tasthau vidvasta bandhanah. Translation. Maharaja Harishchandra first purified his mind, which was full of material enjoyment, by amalgamating it with the earth. Then he amalgamated the earth with water, the water with fire, the fire with air, and air with the sky. Thereafter, he amalgamated the sky with the total material energy, and the total material energy with spiritual knowledge. This spiritual knowledge is the realization of one's self as part of the Supreme Lord. When the self-realized spiritual soul is engaged in service to the Lord, he is eternally imperceptible and inconceivable. Thus, established in spiritual knowledge, he is completely freed from material bondage. Purport. There's no purport, it just says, thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Descendants of King Mandhata. So out here, I think one of the important points that is coming out is controlling the mind, which is so important to make spiritual progress. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a word, I'm just trying to get the verse.
Manas chanchalati Krishna.
Yes. Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor ivasu dushkaram. The mind is very restless, turbulent, strong and obstinate, O Krishna. It appears to me that it is more difficult to control than the wind. So, and this is spoken by Arjuna when Krishna is telling him about the different factors. He's realizing the mind is the most difficult to control. And when the mind is not in control, obviously we will be gravitating to all the other kinds of sense gratification. This is what is happening over here, and you see that Harishchandra has to first purify his mind, which is full of material enjoyment. And that is no different when it comes to all of us, or at least to me. If we are not able to control that mind, then we are bound to get sucked into that quicksand or that whirlpool that I had mentioned of material enjoyment. And only after controlling the mind and purifying his mind is he able to make progress and go to that next level of spiritual knowledge or realization that one's self as part of the Supreme Lord. So, what Prabhupada says in that commentary, he says that the mind is turbulent because it creates upheavals in one's consciousness in the form of hatred, anger, lust, greed, envy, anxiety, fear, attachment, etc. It is strong because it overpowers the intellect with its vigorous currents and destroys the faculty of discrimination. So, we need to keep this in mind, that it's very, very important that if we don't control the mind, we are bound to fall slave to this. What Prabhupada further says, for a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium towards both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. Says the individual is the passenger in the car of the material body and the intelligence is the driver. The mind is the driving instrument and the senses are the horses. So here you can say that the mind is compared to the reins that are holding the horses, which are the senses. And the self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and the senses. So the self over here, who is the passenger in the car, can either choose to suffer or enjoy as long as you are in this association of the mind and the senses. So it is understood by great thinkers, intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. As an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. So listen to this carefully. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. And he compares it to an acute infection which may surpass the efficacy of a medicine. So while internally our intelligence is telling us, don't do this, don't do this, don't fall for this trap, the mind is so strong, it will convince us that one more time, let's do this one more time, let's enjoy this one more time. So such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga. But such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance in all humanity. The method prescribed is Savai Manaha Krishna Padara Vindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. So it's not easy, but it is doable. And till such time we don't put in an effort in that direction, we will not make progress. So a glass can be there and it might be half filled with water, right? Now there are two ways of looking at it, at the glass as half empty or as the glass as half full. But there is a third way to look at that glass which is half filled with water, which is how can you make it full? How can you fill it up? And that is the mindset that we as sadhakas have to build, is that how can we fill that glass up and make our sadhana complete, 100% perfect. It will take time, it's going to take effort. But if we are in the mindset that, oh, this is half full already, I can take it easy, we are not going to make the progress that is required. The same time, if you are looking at it as, oh, this is half empty, and we are in the pessimistic mindset, we think that it's half empty, I'm not in that space, I'm not so spiritually involved, so it's okay for me to deviate. Still, we are not going to make space. The right mindset that is being needed is, how can I fill up that glass? How do I fill up that glass and make it full? And that is the only way we are going to be controlling the mind, as what Prabhupada says, that in this Kali Yuga, the simplest and easiest way is to chant Hare Krishna. But when we are doing that Hare Krishna chanting, when we are doing that sadhana, are we disciplined? Are we dedicated? Are we committed to do it correctly? Are we committing the 10 offenses? We say the 10 offenses in chanting the holy name of the Lord. How many of those 10 offenses are we ensuring are not committed during our chanting? Think about that, right? How many of those 10 offenses are not done when we are doing any kind of kirtana? So we need to keep reminding ourselves, and the more you remind yourself, you will be in a better space. But the moment we start getting those spaces or gaps in between, it will become more and more difficult. And for us as Grihasthas, it's not easy. In this modern world, each of us are having day jobs, we are working, and there will be time and space where we are not fully maybe in a space. At least I am not, like, let's say when I'm going to work or when I'm working, my mind is in a different space and I might not be thinking about Krishna at that time. But then there will be those moments where I do remember him, and it's a great opportunity for me to bring myself back in that space again, even if it is for just a moment, even if it is for a few minutes. We need to find that time and space. Otherwise, over here, if we are not able to control our mind, if we are not able to purify our mind is going to control us. No matter how smart we are, how intelligent we are, it will be taking over. So with that, let's conclude this class. But before that, I just want to also ask if anybody else has any other reflections to share. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share your reflections before we can close the class. All right, if there are nothing else, then we can close the class, Mataji. अनंतराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव। हरे कृष्ण।
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare
It's a
Krishna.
wonderful session.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.